You're chilling in Hawaii, on the island of Oahu. A friend calls you up. Hey, I'm here too. Meet me in Maui. Great, but how do you get there? Your first thought is probably to take a ferry, but that's impossible. Hawaii is a pretty unique place. It's the most expensive state to live in. It has its own official language besides English. And it's the only American state made up entirely of islands. Hawaii has a total of 137 islands. 8 are the main ones, but only 6 are open to tourists. And the distance between those islands is probably bigger than you'd expect. For example, traveling from Oahu to the Big Island is around 185 miles, which is about the same distance as Chicago to Indianapolis. You might be surprised that you can't make that trip by boat. In fact, the only ferry system that actually takes passengers in Hawaii runs between Maui and Lanai. That's it. So your only option is to travel between islands is by plane. Honestly, it's a little surprising, especially considering how many people visit Hawaii every year. Tourism pretty much drives their economy, and in the first 8 months of 2024 alone, over 6 million people visited its beautiful beaches. Knowing that, we would expect Hawaii to set up a good ferry system to make it easier for visitors to get around. Just like in Greece. This would probably boost tourism even more, bringing more money to the state. But believe me, authorities and private companies also know that. In fact, they've already tried it. Ferries were a big way of getting around in Hawaii from the 19th century up until the 1950s. Since then, there have been a few attempts to bring back a ferry service, but unfortunately, they have all failed. One of the biggest attempts was the Hawaii Super Ferry, which aimed to provide a fast, affordable boat service between islands. It could carry almost 900 passengers and even allow them to bring their own cars along. The trial run started in 2007, and people were excited, but it turned into a big fiasco. A bunch of legal and environmental issues came up, like concerns about the impact on marine life, especially whales. The courts decided the ferry didn't go through the proper environmental reviews, and that caused a lot of trouble. By 2009, after tons of protests and setbacks, they had to shut it down. If a project like this comes up again, it will probably fail one more time. And there are a few reasons why it's almost impossible to set up a regular ferry system there. Let's start by talking about Hawaii's rough waters. They are deep and wild. Take the Alenoiaha Channel, for example. It's a 30-mile stretch that separates Maui from the Big Island. Its name means Great Billow Smashing Channel, and it lives up to that. It's over 6,000 feet deep, making it one of the most dangerous stretches of water on Earth. The wind there is also super strong, the fastest in Hawaii's coastal waters. But it's not any easier in the rest of the archipelago. The whole region gets hit by storms from the Pacific up north, sending big waves crashing into the islands and making the waters rough and unpredictable. Swells can come from 3, 4, or even more directions, making the sea feel really choppy. Someone who's not used to taking ferry boats would definitely find that, well, uncomfortable, to say the least. To deal with rough seas like this, the ferries have to be really big and strong. But that also makes them more expensive and harder to run than the ones in places like Alaska or Washington State. Another reason it's so tough to set up this system today has to do with marine life. A big ship moving through the shallower waters when docking could really damage the local ecosystem. And there's also the problem that the sea routes are also the migration paths of many sea animals, like humpback whales and spinner dolphins. Not to mention, ferry services can make it easier to spread harmful plants and animals, what experts call invasive species. See, Hawaii's ecosystem is super unique because it's been isolated out in the middle of the Pacific. When we talk about plants and animals that are native to Hawaii, we mean they got there on their own, no humans involved. They arrived with the help of waves, wind, or even birds flying over. But events like these are super rare. So for over 70 million years, their plants and animals didn't have to deal with outside competition. That's made them really fragile. So, when new species get brought in by us, it can be a big problem, and they could end up harming the environment. Hawaii's already been battling invasive species like fire ants, coqui frogs, and meconium, a fast-growing plant from South America that takes over native forests. People there worry that ferries, which carry cars and cargo between islands, could accidentally spread these invaders even more. Like we mentioned at the beginning of the video, the long distances between their lands don't really help either. For example, if you were to travel from Oahu to the big island of Hawaii by boat, it would take around 30 hours, and that's without any stops. The same trip by plane takes about 50 minutes. Ferries that cover long distances are much more expensive, so they need a much bigger demand to make them profitable. On top of that, the state doesn't really have the infrastructure, like enough ports and terminals to support the operations. So setting up new routes is pretty much out of the question. Airplanes, on the other hand, are a different story. The air travel industry in Hawaii is already well established and super competitive. That means flying is still the most practical option in Hawaii. Planes are quick, they don't make you seasick, and are pretty affordable, usually costing around $100 for a round trip. Okay, but what do the locals think about all this? Well, apparently, there isn't a huge demand for residents to commute between the islands all that often. Oahu is the busiest island in Hawaii, with about 70% of the state's population living there. It is where Honolulu, the capital, is located, and where most of the state's business happens. So, people from the other islands usually come over for a specific doctor's appointment or to catch a big concert. And that might happen once or twice a year, no more than that. So, even if people could choose between taking a ferry and a plane for these special occasions, most of them would probably still prefer flying. There are plenty of options between the main island airports. Planes usually start flying around 5 in the morning, and there are flights available every hour until the last one, which is usually at 9 in the evening. If you've been dreaming of going to this paradisiacal place but are worried about spending too much on plane tickets, I have some tips for you. First off, keep in mind that visiting all the main islands in 5 days or less is way too ambitious. So, if you don't have much time to spend there, think about your priorities. Each of the 6 islands open to tourists has its own vibe and activities. But you don't need to visit them all in one trip, and you can save some money by sticking to fewer islands. You can still explore the diversity of the islands by picking 2 that offer a nice contrast to each other. For example, while Oahu has that bustling city energy, Kauai has a much more relaxed vibe. Also, flights in the morning are usually cheaper, and it might be better to fly on a weekday rather than the weekend, although the price difference isn't usually huge. Hopefully these tips will save you some cash while still having an unforgettable island hopping adventure in Hawaii. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who's also dreaming of exploring these amazing islands.
Now, if you're in an airplane soaring through the air, you may think it's the heaviest object in the sky. But those large cumulus clouds you see shaped like your dog can weigh more than 1,000,000 pounds. Clouds are just tiny drops of water gathered up together. Don't worry, they won't come crashing down in pieces. It may seem like there are infinite stars in the Milky Way galaxy, but NASA experts are convinced that there are potentially 100 to 400 billion stars out there. There are around 3 trillion trees in the world, and about 400,000 plant species. Out of all those plants, between 80,000 and 300,000 are edible, but only about 200 of those plants land in different cuisines. If you're standing in Alaska, you can expect Hawaii to inch its way to you ever so slowly. You might not feel it, but tectonic plates are always moving at the same rate as your fingernails are growing. Hawaii moves 3 inches every year because the Pacific Plate is always pushing northward. Bees buzz around with 4 wings instead of 2. The 2 wings you usually see become a single wing when they fly. But when they land and chill around, they unhook back to forewings. They even have an invisible chain network where they fly through to go from flower to flower. Bees can fly higher than Mount Everest, which is almost 30,000 feet high. Hurricanes can't rush across the equator because of something called the Coriolis effect, which is also responsible for many megastorms. Low pressures in the northern hemisphere rotate counterclockwise. In the southern hemisphere, it goes clockwise. So, if a hurricane swings by the equator, it won't be able to rotate. The acid inside your stomach so strong it can melt stainless steel. The acid inside is rocking a pH of 2 to 3 and doesn't melt your insides thanks to a stomach lining which secretes a chemical to balance it out. Your body replaces this lining every 4 days or so. Owls have something like eye tubes instead of eyeballs. Humans can turn their heads at a 180-degree angle and can rotate their eyes in multiple directions. Owls don't move their eyes freely like us, but they make up for it by turning their heads 270 degrees. They can see really well at night. Okay, chameleon, we get it. You can move your eyes independently in all directions. Please stop staring at me. If you happen to be in outer space on a planet in our solar system, then chances are you're swimming in diamonds. The atmospheres of planets like Jupiter and Saturn have high pressures that can crystallize carbon atoms and create diamonds. Scientists even claim that all that icy bling rains as much as 2 million pounds yearly in Saturn. The sun will keep getting brighter and hotter and eventually evaporate oceans, making life on Earth like an oven, similar to Venus. Our Milky Way is on its course to a collision with the Andromeda Galaxy. Stars, asteroids, planets, and moons will smash right into each other and destroy everything. Of course, something like this doesn't happen overnight, but eventually the two galaxies will combine into a single mega cluster galaxy. This won't happen for billions of years, though. I won't be around then. Slow lorises with their bugged eyes may be cute, but they're the only venomous primates in the animal kingdom. They get venom from a gland under their armpit before biting a predator. Unfortunately, their numbers are dwindling in the wild. Forests and jungles aren't the only ones responsible for producing the majority of the oxygen you breathe. It's the microscopic creatures called photoplankton that live in the upper layers of water, specifically the oceans. Like plants, they also use photosynthesis to turn sunlight into oxygen. There are so many of them that they contribute 50 to 85% of all the oxygen. Pluto was discovered in 1930, and until now hasn't even made a full rotation around the Sun. It takes Pluto 248 years to make a full orbit, which means Pluto will celebrate with fireworks and countdowns in the year 2178. There have been instances where snow was covering the sandy landscapes of the Sahara Desert, and it isn't even the largest desert on Earth. The winner in that category goes to the Antarctic polar desert. Instead of sand, it's made of frozen water. Even the Sahara receives more rainfall than the Antarctic desert. In 1933, the double eagle was a coin valued at $20. Only a few of these were released, but the trend never picked up, and so the coin was reclaimed. Some were kept, but most were destroyed. In 2002, someone bought one of these coins at an auction for $7.5 million, making it the most expensive coin ever sold at an auction. Kangaroos have a spring-like action on their legs, which makes them hop around. But it's impossible for them to do so without their tails, that act as a counterweight. These hoppers can bounce at a speed of around 15 miles per hour, and kangaroos can't hop backwards. Your favorite summer snack was invented by accident by an 11-year-old boy in 1905. Frank Epperson accidentally left soda powder and water with a wooden stick overnight and got frozen stiff. He called it the Ep cycle at first, but popsicle stuck around, and now they come in many awesome flavors. The biggest animal on Earth weighs as much as 33 elephants. Its tongue alone can be as heavy as one of those elephants. A blue whale's heart can weigh as much as a small car and needs to beat every 10 seconds. 3 big blue whales stacked head to fin are about the length of the Statue of Liberty. A human can even swim through their large veins with ease. The nano chameleon is the tiniest reptile to be discovered. In January 2021, scientists went on an expedition in northern Madagascar rainforests and found this little critter. It feeds on mites and other microscopic creatures and is a little more than half an inch long. Europa is one of Jupiter's many moons and is the closest thing scientists call our next potential home within our solar system. The surface is covered in ice, but it's believed there's an ocean underneath that could be teeming with microscopic living beings. If you're afraid of the dark, then the moon is probably no place for you. Shadows are darker on the moon than on Earth. On our blue planet, the atmosphere is able to scatter more sunlight, unlike on the moon. The people of ancient Greece and Rome used sticky spider webs as natural bandages for patients. The webbings have built-in natural chemicals that help with healing. Spider webs are so strong that 2 inches of wrapped spiderweb material can stop a plane when at landing speed. A study shows that tree shrews have a mutation in their system that makes them less sensitive to spices. They're the only known mammal, other than humans, to enjoy the flavors of mouth-burning chili foods. They did an experiment with a bunch of other mammals and found out that while the mammals avoided the spicy food, the tree shrews gobbled it down without thinking. Dolphins are one of the smartest creatures in the world, partly because they can sleep while being awake. When sleeping in the wild, their brains have to be partially on guard for any predators lurking in the water. When the heat rises in a fire, the air around it rushes to replace it, causing a spinning column to form. And that's how fire tornadoes or fire whirls are born. Octopuses may be rare to spot since they camouflage themselves so well, but they can lay more than 55,000 eggs. The mother will spend the next 6 months taking care of them, and once they hatch, they can be the size of a single rice grain. Next time you're cuddling with your cat, check out their back paws and count how many toes they have. There are 5 toes on each of their forepaws, but only 4 on their hindpaws. Scientists believe it helps them run faster or escape after plotting against you. Chow chows and some other dog breeds have bluish-purple tongues. Giraffes also have tongues of a similar color, except theirs are around 20 inches long. They use them for grabbing leaves from high branches. Next time you visit the Eiffel Tower, take a picture in the summer and the winter. If you have super bionic eyesight, then you'll notice that in the summer, the higher temperatures can make the tower grow by 6 inches. Hey, any view of the Eiffel is an eyeful. Imagine you decided to take a road trip the old-fashioned way. And by that I mean you decide to do it without the help of any technology. What? So you go to the nearest convenience store and buy a map of each state you plan to pass through. You buckle them up on the passenger seat right next to you and set off on your adventure. During your first week, you arrive in the state of New York. You wave bye-bye to Lady Liberty, eat a slice of pizza, and head upstate. Near the Catskills, you notice you're running low on gas and decide to stop in the nearest town to fill up your tank. You check your map, and it appears that the nearest place is a small village called Agloe, right at the next intersection. You drive a few minutes and pass through a sign that says, "Welcome to Agloe, home of the Agloe General Store." Well, this must be it, you think to yourself. But the town is strangely empty. You can't find the store or the gas station you were looking for. There are no houses. You start to think there might be a mistake. Agloe doesn't seem to exist. This story may sound made up, but it could have actually happened to anyone passing through New York a few years ago. Actually, the so-called town of Agloe is what is called a phantom settlement or a paper town. There are several of these around the world, but Agloe is probably the most famous. Paper towns are basically fake towns. That is, they don't really exist. They're made up of Easter eggs put there by map makers as a kind of copyright trap. Maps are tough to make. To create a map from scratch, one has to do years of fieldwork or analysis of satellite photos. That's why plagiarism has always been rampant among map makers. It's pretty easy to redraw the same geographical features from one map onto a new map, and it is hard to get caught. People are, after all, drawing the exact same world. That's why map makers came up with a way to catch individuals stealing their data. Some map makers may include a mountain that is bigger than they are in reality. Others might add a slight turn on a road, where in reality there is none. For example, in the early 1970s, a fake mountain peak appeared on some Boulder County maps. The addition of this previously unknown peak, called Mount Richard, into local maps began to confuse Colorado rock climbers at the time. It turned out that Mount Richard was one of these copyright traps, put there by a local mapsman called Richard Ciacci. Let's just say he must have decided to pay a tribute to himself with this little addition. Now, adding a paper town is perhaps one of the most extreme solutions, one that mapmakers hope goes unnoticed. But that's not what usually happens, which leads us back to the Agloe story. Mapmakers Ernest Alpertz and Otto Lindbergh from the CDG, General Drafting Corporation, were part of the largest map publishers of the 1930s. Back then, the company was commissioned to create a map of the state of New York. That's when the two men had an idea. In order to prevent copyright infringement, they would create a phantom settlement combining parts of their names together. They came up with the strange name Agloe and added the fake town along Route 206 near the water reservoir of Catskills in upstate New York. The area was supposed to be, in reality, a dirt road. Years later, Rand McNally, another map designing company, produced a map of New York that included a town called Agloe in the same location where CDG had originally placed it. Lindbergh was convinced that he had a copyright case against his competitor, but the story just kept getting more complicated. Both companies went to settle the case in court, but as it turned out, McNally had a legitimate reason for adding Agloe to their version of a New York map. You see, in order to fabricate their maps, McNally did a thorough research on real estate and establishments located in each existing town. And as it turned out, Agloe was not an empty town when they drew their map. Records show that the town housed an establishment named Agloe General Store. Sure, it was the only building in town, but that was enough for the mapmakers to believe that such a town really existed. They added Agloe to the map like they would add any other town with physical establishments. It seemed they weren't infringing any copyright if this once phantom settlement had somehow come to life. The plot twist is that CDG's Alpers and Lindbergh could never have foreseen that someone would decide to occupy a made-up town. But it happened. One day, someone bought a map from a regional gas station that had Agloe marked on it. The person wanted to open a store more or less where Agloe existed, so they decided to name the store after the town it was in. They trusted the accuracy of the map they bought and named their business Agloe General Store. After all, why would there be a non-existent town on an official map? The general store didn't last many years, only enough to turn this story into a mess. On the bright side, this whole debacle turned Agloe into a super famous fictitious settlement. It became a tourist spot, with people driving from all over the U.S. to get a picture of the town's welcome sign. Now, as we said before, paper towns are plenty around the world and over time, too. A 2005 BBC documentary revealed that the City of London alone had over 100 tiny fake streets or paper streets around the city. For instance, the so-called Moat Lane is supposedly a curving road in Finchley, North London. But if you ever decide to go visit, you'll find nothing but trees and gardens. And what about Argleton, a town in the north of England? Or, more accurately, an empty field in northeastern England? Argleton existed for a while on Google Maps. There were hotel listings and apartments for rent in town. Well, the only thing is that they weren't really in Argleton, but rather in nearby settlements. It's believed that Google Maps imported these fake streets into its database, as they used renowned copyrighted atlases as their sources. But as the truth about these paper streets surfaced, the company later deleted them. If we turn back the clock a few hundred years, we'll find another mystery story involving a possible phantom settlement. But this isn't a tiny town at an intersection, but rather an entire island. Bermejo Island was speculated to be a tiny inhabited island. It appeared on many maps of the 16th and 17th centuries and was a hot spot for Spanish explorers. Its location sometimes varied slightly from map to map, and occasionally its name appeared as Vermija, but its existence seems certain enough. It wasn't until the 18th century that the island stopped being depicted in maps altogether. This island's last appearance dates back to a 1921 edition of a Mexican atlas, and then, poof, it dropped out of the horizon altogether. The case of Mexico's disappeared island has raised many questions. Did it sink? Was it destroyed? Are people simply looking for it in the wrong place? 3 official investigations took place in 2009 to locate the island. They used high-end technologies, scouring Mexico's oceans and seabeds. Yet, Bermeja remained nowhere to be found. One can't help but wonder if the island ever existed at all. Similar to modern-day mapmakers, 16th and 17th century mapmakers had their way to trick map users. Instead of copyright traps, these fake towns or even fake islands served as a way to fool and confuse enemies and unwanted voyagers. Since a long time has gone by, it's hard to know whether Bermeja was just another phantom settlement. It stopped being depicted on maps, but this mysterious case still leaves people baffled and confused. So it turns out that so-called rich countries are facing a big problem. People are not having kids. Not enough, at least. On average, women need to have 2 children to keep things balanced, but they're only having 1, or none at all. This issue comes down to the fertility rate, or simply the average number of kids a woman is expected to have in her lifetime. When that number's too low, it means more people are passing away in these countries than being born, and that can destroy the economy. Think of a rich country – the US, Germany, Japan. Great! Pick any wealthy nation you like. And I can promise you one thing, its fertility rate is below 2.1, and that's a problem. Here's why. Meet Mary and John, and over here we've got Jack and Lucy. That's 4 people total. Now, both couples get married. Mary and John have 2 kids, but Jack and Lucy only have 1. Now, what does that mean? Simple math, we're down by 1 person. And if this keeps happening, generation after generation, the population starts to shrink. The situation gets pretty scary when we zoom in on certain countries. Take Spain, Italy, or Poland. These countries have some of the lowest fertility rates in the European Union, with women there having, on average, just 1 kid. And that's a big problem, because it drags down entire economies. Picture a triangle, young people and workers at the bottom and the elderly at the top. In many rich countries, that bottom part is shrinking fast, with fewer babies being born each year. So it's like this triangle is flipping upside down. Fewer young folks and workers, but more and more older people. With fewer workers and more retirees, the economy struggles to stay balanced. It's like the domino effect. Fewer people working means fewer people paying taxes. Meanwhile, the older population at the top keeps growing. And now we have a way bigger group depending on pensions and stuff like Social Security. So we're left asking, who's going to pay for all these retirements? Now, some countries are in hotter water than others, and South Korea is really feeling the heat. They've got more and more people getting older, while fewer and fewer babies are being born. In fact, they've got the lowest fertility rate in the world. In 2023, it hit rock bottom, 0.72 births per woman. Now, personally, I don't know how you can have 3/4 of a kid, but hey, that's statistics for you. Meanwhile, if things keep going like this, Korea's population could shrink by half by 2100. Over the last 20 years, their authorities have invested at the equivalent of $286 billion in this issue, and they've rolled out a bunch of incentives to turn things around. First up, pocket money. If a married couple in Korea decides to have their first kid, the government hands over about $10,000 split into monthly payments to help out. While that might sound impressive, it's only about 3 times the average monthly wage. And in Seoul, one of the most expensive cities in the world, that doesn't go very far. Next, a home. Paying rent in Seoul is insane, but the government doesn't want people to leave the capital because of it. So they're stepping in. Recently, they've promised to give families around $300 a month to help with housing, until the kid turns 2. Then again, $300 seems great, but it only covers about 11% of the rent for a 3-bedroom apartment in the city center. And last but not least, health care. Hospital bills are covered, but the couple must be married, on paper and everything. South Korea came up with all this to fix the problem. Otherwise, their population might get older, poorer, and more dependent on others for care. But when you think about it, all these incentives really come down to one thing – giving out cash. Even so, their demographic problem hasn't gotten any better. So the authorities had to come up with more creative solutions, like offering jobs with flexible hours for parents with kids under 5. And they can borrow things like toys or strollers from the government, totally for free. So why don't women want to become mothers? There's a bunch of reasons. But one of the most important is work. Women are getting more education and grabbing more opportunities in the job market than ever before. But a lot of jobs have crazy hours, with people working late every single day. So many women get stuck in that cycle, waking up early, going to work, coming home late, and sleeping. Then it all starts over the next day. They don't have time to meet a partner, and even less time to raise someone. In fact, education in general is one of the biggest reasons why birth rates are dropping. Spending so many years in school, then in college, means women are pushing back the age they have their first kid. Once they finish their education, they often want to focus on work and building their careers before starting a family. So they're not becoming moms in their teens or early 20s anymore. And by the time they hit 30, things aren't much better. Sure, they might finally land a stable job, but most employment policies still don't offer enough support for childcare. But it's not only education. Younger generations are getting delayed in, well, everything. I mean, it's way harder for them to tick off all the adulting boxes, like having a well-paying job or buying a nice house. And these things are usually a big part of whether people decide to start a family or not. Another reason people aren't having kids: putting a new human into this world is expensive and time-consuming. The average childcare costs in Australia, for example, have gone up faster than inflation. School tuition, even for public schools, takes a big chunk out of parents' budgets. Think about it. Computers, uniforms, field trips, extracurricular activities – all that adds up to the cost of financing someone's education. Over 13 years, parents spend over $80,000 on public education. And if we're talking about private schools, that number jumps up to almost $350,000. And don't worry, these costs are just for one kid. Now imagine having 2 or 3. So what is the solution? Well, there are 2 ways to tackle the problem that don't involve pushing the population to have more kids. Nations can keep their population healthier and employed longer, like what Singapore is doing. They're putting a lot of effort into raising the retirement age, offering midlife training, and encouraging companies to hire older workers, like those over 69. Another way is to encourage people from other countries to come in, especially young ones who are ready to work. That's, for example, the strategy Canada uses. Now, if the goal is really to get women to have more kids, a lot of countries use the baby bonus strategy, basically giving money and benefits to families, just like South Korea does. The problem is that some experts say it is pretty ineffective, as financial incentives don't address the complexity of the issue. For them, what these wealthy countries need to do is offer better career and housing opportunities for young people, like giving incentives for companies to offer more flexible hours or work-from-home options for young parents. They also need to push strategies to lower the cost of housing, especially in big cities. Plus, they need to focus more on the aging population, using technological innovations to support them. That would help not just parents, but families as a whole. So, what do you think?
Scientists discovered something Atlantis-like near Australia. There used to be an entire continent that's now underwater. Here's what happened to it. Around 70,000 years ago, during the last ice age, there was a huge landmass called Sahul. It was located in the southwestern Pacific Ocean. This ancient supercontinent connected what we now know as Australia, New Guinea, Tasmania, and the Aru Islands into one giant piece of land. Imagine lush tropical rainforests surrounded by beautiful mountains. Sahul's tallest mountains were in the New Guinea highlands, with peaks reaching over 13,000 feet. This beautiful place was home to a variety of unique animals, most of which were pouched creatures. But back then, they weren't just koalas and kangaroos. Sahul was filled with different types of grazers, burrowers, scavengers, and predators. It was home to a huge diprotodon, a powerful hunter Thiosolio, and a horrifying Megalania, a creature that's much larger than any living lizard today. It was a unique place because the rest of the world was filled with placental animals at the time, like wolves, elephants, and humans. In Sahul, the only normal mammals were bats and rodents. But not all its parts were the same. The Timor, Arafura, and Carpentaria regions were covered by hot savanna and dry forests. It looked kinda like modern Australia, hot air deserts with scrubland, steppe, and temperate forests along the eastern coast. Back then, people were migrating all across the world. They made an incredible journey from Southeast Asia to Sahul and first arrived here from 60 to 45,000 years ago. They mostly traveled by foot and crossed the sea using bamboo rafts and simple boats. They came there from an ancient landmass called Sunda, which includes parts of Southeast Asia. They traveled across a series of islands known as Wallachia and eventually spread across Sahul. And it wasn't a small journey. Sahul was huge, around 4.1 million square miles. That's bigger than the USA or Canada. It stretched from the equator to around the southern part of New Zealand. So they arrived in what is now Australia and became Australia's first people. Scientists think that Sahul had a population of 500,000. We've discovered cave paintings that date back around 40,000 years. It's a hunting scene depicting an anoa, or miniature buffalo, facing figures of humans and animals. Researchers are trying to figure out how these early settlers moved across Sahul and where we might find archaeological evidence of their journey. To do this, they created a landscape evolution model. The simulation showed how Sahul changed between 75,000 and 35,000 years ago. It showed potential migration routes and archaeological sites. Humans likely traveled along coastlines and rivers. But how did Sahul get submerged off the coast of Australia, similar to the mythical Atlantis? During the last ice age, much of the Earth's water was locked up in large ice sheets and glaciers. The sea levels were much lower than they are today. After that, the global temperatures increased. The ice sheets melted and the sea levels rose, flooding the land bridges that once connected different parts of Sahul together. About 8,000 years ago, New Guinea separated from mainland Australia, and then, about 6,000 years ago, Tasmania did the same. We still can explore the underwater parts of Sahul thanks to new technology. Divers explore and collect samples directly from the ocean floor. Underwater drones can go to places that are too deep or dangerous for humans to explore. And with sonar mapping, scientists use sound waves to create maps of the ocean floor. It's like using an echo to see what's underwater. The sound waves bounce off the seabed and come back, helping us create a picture of what it looks like. Deep underwater, archaeologists have found stone tools and other artifacts. They also discovered fossils of animals like Diprotodon and Thylacoleo. By studying the underwater terrain of Sahul, they learned about the ancient rivers, lakes, and coastlines that existed during the Ice Age. But Sahul isn't the only underwater continent. Sahul isn't the only hidden gem of Southeast Asia. Take Sundaland, a place made up of Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and some other islands. This place was crazy huge during the Ice Age, but now almost fully underwater. Almost, but not entirely. The parts above the ocean are teeming with life. If you like birds, check this place out. It has almost a fifth of the world's bird species. You can spot colorful birds like the Java hawk eagle and the Bali starling among the lush forests. It's also a home to a fourth of Earth's fish species. Sundaland's waters are a haven for marine life, even the most exotic animals like the Asian arowanas. It's also a treasure trove of flowers. That's where you can find Rafflesia and Titan aurum, the world's largest flowers. This makes it very similar to Zealandia. Zealandia is a long, narrow piece of land about half the size of Australia. It broke from Antarctica about 100 million years ago. Just like Sundaland, it isn't fully underwater. 7% of it stayed above sea level. This sticking out little piece is what we now call New Zealand. along with Stewart Island and some smaller islands. These pieces of Zealandia are lush and warm. They're packed with volcanoes, mountain ranges, beautiful natural geysers, and hot springs. Local people, Maori, use these hot springs for cooking. People place corn, eggs, and vegetables in baskets and lower them directly in the hot springs. Sometimes they cook food in a pit oven using heated rocks. Another hidden world is known as Argoland. This mysterious landmass was once part of Australia, back when dinosaurs chilled around. It drove scientists crazy for decades. They knew it existed because it left a huge stretch on the ancient seafloor, the Argo Abyssal Plain. About 155 million years ago, it broke off from Australia, saying bye-bye. The continent drifted somewhere north, and when it reached Southeast Asia, it just vanished. Scientists had no idea where it went, but recently they finally found its remains. Turns out, poor Argoland's lower parts started drowning into the Sunda Trench, a horrifyingly deep oceanic pit. The Earth's crust sunk into the mantle. Meanwhile, the upper parts of Argoland were pushed upward, grabbing the younger rocks on land. Because of this, Argoland broke apart into a bunch of smaller pieces. These pieces formed parts of Borneo, Java, Sulawesi, and other regions. The remains are buried under Indonesia and Myanmar. Imagine a colossal landmass the size of Greenland, Greater Adria. Its journey began about 240 million years ago when it broke away from the supercontinent Gondwana. It started moving north, and after 100 million years of enjoying the warm seas, it suddenly crashed into Europe and shattered into pieces. Most of these pieces went deep into the Earth's mantle, but some were scraped off and became part of mountain ranges like the Alps. Today, the remnants of Greater Adria are scattered across more than 30 countries, from Spain to Iran. That's why they're hard to look for. Seychelles was also once part of Gondwana. Yep, these idyllic islands are sitting atop of the ancient continent. We know a lot about it because of its fascinating granite outcrops. 100 years ago, Alfred Wegener discovered continental drift, but no one believed him. These granite outcrops helped him prove that he's not crazy and that tectonic plates really are moving. The Seychelles broke off from India and Madagascar and eventually became a sad loner in the Indian Ocean. This probably happened because of some insanely active volcanoes in the Deccan Traps. But now the islands are home to unique species both on land and in the coral reefs nearby. Mauritius broke off from India after the dinosaur wiping. Along its journey, it stretched into a long ribbon-like shape and also broke into pieces. Now it's all scattered beneath the Indian Ocean. Scientists stumbled upon this lost land by studying tiny ancient crystals called zircons. These zircons are like time capsules. They date back an astonishing 660 million to 2 billion years. That's even older than Mauritius itself. These ancient crystals hinted that there's another Atlantis somewhere nearby. Turns out there are hidden continents all around the world, and maybe we'll discover more of them in the future. One interesting thing that happens in map design is the so-called Baltimore phenomenon, or Baltimore effect. This phenomenon happens when a city or another object is left off a map because there's just not enough space, while smaller cities make the cut simply because there's room for them. The name comes from Baltimore, Maryland, which often gets left out of maps because it's surrounded by bigger cities like Washington, D.C. But on the flip side, sometimes smaller and less well-known cities like Alice Springs in Australia end up on the same map simply because there's enough space for them. Like at this scale, Alice Springs, which give or take 25,000 inhabitants, is labeled. But the huge city of Guangzhou, with over 14 million people, is somehow not. This phenomenon is more common on automated mapping sites, but it doesn't happen at every zoom level. On popular sites like Google Maps and other similar ones, you'll only start seeing Baltimore show up at certain zoom levels, like the 5th, 6th, or 7th zoom. Cartographers can tweak their maps to make sure they're useful and convey spatial information effectively, finding the right balance between showing important details and keeping the map clear and focused. The best maps are the ones that show key elements clearly, while still accurately representing the world. But Alice Springs is not the only weird thing on the map of Australia. Look at the time zone map. This 10.5 section looks a bit off, huh? Well, Australia is officially divided into 3 standard time zones: Western, Central, and Eastern. Australian Central Time aligns with UTC plus 9:30, with individual states and territories deciding whether to observe daylight savings time. Australian island territories and Antarctic stations contribute to the complexity of the time zones. Despite this, Australian time zones are generally easy to understand. In addition to the official time zones, there is an unofficial hybrid time zone called Australian Central Western Standard Time. This time zone is halfway between Western Time, UTC plus 8, and Central Time, UTC plus 9:30, making it UTC plus 8:45, a unique quarter-hour difference. Australian Central Western Standard Time is only observed in a small area in far southeastern Western Australia, along the Eyre Highway. The Australian Central Western Standard Time area includes settlements such as Cocklebitti, Madura, Mundrabilla, Eucla, and Border Village. Only a few hundred people live in this region, making it easier for them to agree on a non-standard time zone. Despite the lack of official approval, Australian Central Western Standard Time continues to be followed due to the significant time gap between Western and Central time zones, especially during the summer when South Australia observes daylight saving time and Western Australia does not. The use of this unique time zone can often lead to confusion, even amongst the locals. Eucla Police, for example, operate on Perth's time zone, causing occasional tardiness to events such as community gatherings. Locals mentioned that in the past, Eucla operated on its own unofficial time, which made things simpler, before the transition to align with Perth time. They also face confusion as their location in South Australia does not observe daylight savings. The history of the Australian Central Western Standard Time dates back to the establishment of a telegraph station in Eucla in 1877. Although the exact origins of this time zone are unclear, it is speculated that it was adopted to avoid confusion at the telegraph station located on the border between Western Australia and South Australia. UTC plus 9:45 was historically utilized in Australia as a time zone known as Central Western Daylight Time. Certain roadhouses along the Eyre Highway in South Australia and Western Australia adopted UTC plus 9:45 during the summer months when South Australia observed daylight savings time. While not officially recognized by the authorities, the boundaries of this time zone are clearly outlined and often depicted on local road maps. 5 locations in Australia, including Border Village, Kaiguna, Eucla, Madura, and Mundrabilla, previously observed UTC plus 9:45. Currently, these areas operate on UTC plus 8:45 due to Western Australia's lack of daylight savings time. Australia is not the only example of weird time zones. China has a population of approximately 1.5 billion people, and it's the 3rd largest country in the world. Despite its vast size, China operates on a single time zone known as Beijing Time or China Standard Time. This unique time zone covers almost 5 geographical time zones within the country. At times, in some cities in China, the sun rises as late as 10 a.m. People often have lunch after 2 p.m., or even after 4 p.m. if they're not in a hurry. Since 1991, daylight savings time has not been observed in China. However, the region of Xinjiang, located in the western part of the country, follows Xinjiang time, which is 2 hours behind China Standard Time, and is considered an unofficial time zone. Nepal also has its unique time zone, as it operates on Nepal time all year round, without the use of daylight savings time. It's a bit unique compared to other countries because it has a UTC offset of plus 545, meaning that Nepali clocks are 5 hours and 45 minutes ahead of Coordinated Universal Time. This is only a 15-minute difference from neighboring India, where the standard time used to be the same until Nepal decided to set its own time zone in 1956. Now, let's examine the map of Europe. Great Britain, Portugal, and Spain are all located at roughly the same latitude. However, despite this, it's 1 hour earlier in Portugal and the UK compared to Spain. Why is this the case? In the 1940s, Spain was instructed to switch to German time, a directive that was accepted by Spanish authorities. Over time, despite changes in leadership, Spain remained in the same time zone, resulting in it being 1 hour behind its neighboring countries at the same latitude. But like many other countries, Spain sticks to daylight savings time. Greenland would rank as the world's 12th largest country if it were independent, but it's currently part of Denmark. The country has 3 different time zones. Most of it is 3 hours behind Greenwich Mean Time, except for only one town on the eastern coast, which is 2 hours ahead. Thule Air Base in the northwest operates on GMT-4, while the tiny population of Danmarkshavn sticks to GMT. Daylight savings time was implemented to give us more daylight during the evenings after work, which could help save energy by lowering the need for lights and heat. It was first suggested by Benjamin Franklin in 1784 to align waking hours with daylight and conserve energy, and was implemented in Port Arthur, Ontario in 1906. Since then, many countries have adopted the practice, though some regions near the equator or at high latitudes opt out due to minimal variations in daylight hours. In the United States, daylight savings time is observed almost everywhere, except in Hawaii and Arizona. Arizona's scorching hot weather makes daylight saving time kind of pointless. People there would rather get stuff done in the cool morning hours than sweat it out in the evenings. However, the Navajo Nation, which is autonomous Native American territory, sticks to the same daylight savings time schedule as the rest of the country. Even though it spans 3 states, Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, they keep the time consistent across their lands. As for Hawaii, due to its tropical location, the amount of sunlight doesn't change much throughout the year. If Hawaii changed its time zone to UTC-9 during daylight savings time, the sun would rise at around 7 a.m. in June. This is because most of the islands are situated towards the west of the Hawaii-Aleutian time zone, and theoretically should be in the next time zone to the west. In the past, Hawaiian Standard Time was based on a different longitude than it is now.
Behind those huge steel doors is one of the most guarded places on Earth. It's known as Site R, or the Raven Rock Mountain Complex. You'll find it in Pennsylvania. The construction is 60 stories underground and is said to be a safe place for people in case of a natural or human-made disaster. There's not a lot of information online about this mysterious place, but what we do know is that it's equipped with 38 communication systems. It's obviously not available for visits via Google Earth, but you can catch a quick glance at the 2 gates that face the complex. Vatican City is one of the most famous enclaves on Earth, and it's certainly worth a visit due to its wonderful architecture and vast list of art pieces to check out. One place, however, will always be off limits for visitors: the Vatican's secret archives. They have some of the oldest and rarest books on Earth. These archives are available only to a limited number of people, and since they have been visited by a small number of people so far, they also trigger a lot of weird theories. For example, that there may be books proving there's life outside our planet. If you're fascinated by shipwrecks, you'll be interested to know that one of the largest wrecks you can see on Google Earth is on North Sentinel Island, India. It used to be called the SS Jassim. It was a Bolivian ferry that sank in the area back in 2003. The reason why people can't visit it physically isn't because of the ship itself, but because the island is home to the world's most dangerous tribe. We don't really know how many people live there, but it was estimated that between 50 to 400 people call this place home. And they really don't like tourists. No person that tried to reach them survived. Also, to protect them, their privacy, and their special status, the island is closely monitored by the Indian authorities. That's mostly because it's believed the locals don't have any immunity to modern diseases. So being in contact with foreigners might be dangerous for the tribe's people, since they've never seen the outer world. A huge pink bunny appeared seemingly out of nowhere in the Italian Coleto Fava Mountains back in 2005. Besides the locals, some people stumbled upon it online too. They were puzzled by the discovery. Unfortunately, that 200-foot-tall bunny is completely gone today. You can still find the images of it online though. The unusual object was designed by artists from Vienna. They encouraged tourists to climb, jump, or even take a nap on top of the large rabbit. The whole purpose of the project was to allow people to experience what it would be like to live as smaller creatures. The bunny didn't have any removal date at the time it was placed there and was expected to last at least until 2025. But Mother Nature had other plans. A Japanese artist decided to move back to her little home village named Nagoro. But she soon found out that most of her neighbors were moving to bigger cities. To deal with loneliness, she started putting together scarecrow-like dolls, or kakashi, and placing them all over her garden. She didn't stop there though. The artist soon began doing the same with many other places in her village, creating dolls and placing them as if they were taking part in various human activities. These dolls keep moving around too, but the woman likes to stay true to her story and insists she doesn't touch them. You can see the images of this quirky village on Google Maps. This weird portal was discovered via online maps in New Baltimore, New York. It gave people all sorts of bad dreams. With spooky-looking buildings and all sorts of blurry figures, this area soon became a source for many weird internet theories. Turns out it was nothing more than a technical issue, which resulted in those images being rendered in a distorted manner. Either way, if you look for these images on Google, you won't be able to unsee them. This cute miniature world map was created by an artist from Denmark. He continuously worked on this tedious project from 1944 until 1967, using mostly his hands and just a few tools for moving heavy rocks around. He gathered stones at the edge of the water, then recreated the map of the world on the surface of this lake. During the winter, he was able to use a sled to transport larger pieces of rock over the ice and then place them in the perfect position. Apart from the continents themselves, the map also features rivers and lakes, as well as some other famous landmarks. Care to have a look at a sea without any coasts? Search for the Sargasso Sea. You'll find it in the northern Atlantic Ocean. This weird sea is surrounded by 4 ocean currents and no dry land at all. It got its name from the seaweed that grows there, sargassum. Fingerprints on the lens of a satellite camera? You may be tricked into thinking this if you search for the Finger Maze. It's located in the city of Brighton, UK, and is a large fingerprint created in Hove Park. It also has a maze at the center. It can be really hard and time-consuming to look for wild animals on Google Earth, but the Geo browser does have a nice feature that can help if you're eager to see hippos and flamingos in their natural habitat. Try Googling animals from above and start scrolling through these images. This unique feature can take you from Kenya to Namibia and even all the way to Antarctica, where you can see emperor penguins. There are some places on Google Maps that, for specific reasons, aren't available for the online public, like the Royal Palace in Amsterdam. If you head over there via Google Earth, you'll see that everything around the Dutch Royal Palace is still visible, like the vegetation and roads, but the construction itself is blurred from all angles. That's probably because local authorities want to keep the unique views of the palace for the eyes of physical visitors only. The same goes for the Tantaco National Park in Chile. This one is a privately owned nature reserve that can only be seen on Google Maps from a distance. Once you reach a certain point, the zoom feature stops working. Some people say that since it's a nature preserve, it may be home to some endangered species, and extreme measures are taken for their protection. You know how a certain brand of fried chicken has a certain kernel on their logo? Yeah, you won't see any of these logos in high resolution on Google Maps. That's because the online map uses specific algorithms to detect people's faces and blur them out. As you can see, it's not always really that accurate. It's called Snake Island, and the Brazilian authorities prohibit people from visiting it. For good reason. You'll find the island near the city of Sao Paulo in Brazil. It's said to be home to over 4,000 snakes. Some of the most venomous types of reptiles on Earth call this place home. If that's not creepy enough, how about that some of them are so dangerous that a small drop of their venom can permanently damage the human skin? You can see the shape of the island on Google Earth, but the more you zoom in, the blurrier it becomes. Here's another cool thing you can do on Google Earth: time travel. Well, at least sort of. You won't be able to travel back in time and tell yourself to study more for that tricky exam, but you can see certain historical images of places you like. You can check if this feature works by looking at the upper left corner of the screen. If you can see a small icon with a clock, it may allow you to scroll some years back. But you can also see how sunlight affects Earth if you turn on the sunlight feature.
It was April 10th, 1912. Richard had just departed from Southampton, England, aboard the most famous ship of the time, dubbed the Unsinkable. Since he had just witnessed a near collision with the SS City of New York, he decided to write to his wife and report the unfortunate and frightening event. "My dearest Sal," he wrote, "we got away yesterday after a lot of trouble." Little did he know that a mere 4 days later, both his pen and the ship he was on would be lost forever at the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean. Was this some sort of bad omen? Did Richard actually foresee what was about to happen to the ship he was on? In case you haven't figured it out by now, Mr. Richard Geddes was aboard the Titanic on the day that he wrote the letter to his wife. On April 14th, 1912, the ship seemed to have been lost forever. Along with it, so many secrets and treasures have settled at the bottom of the ocean. It took until 1985 for the Titanic's wreck to be finally rediscovered using state-of-the-art sonar technology. Ever since then, they've managed to recover thousands of items from the Titanic, and many of them went on display or auction. Things like jewelry, a life jacket, a menu from the ship's restaurant, or even a sample square of carpet from the first-class stateroom have all captivated the public's attention, just like the many stories of the people on board. Scientists have even tried to come up with strategies to get the Titanic back up altogether to properly study it and stop it from getting more and more damaged at the bottom of the ocean. Some have suggested filling the wreck with ping pong balls to make it float, while others even considered injecting it with 180,000 tons of Vaseline. Another idea was to use 450,000 tons of liquid nitrogen to trap it in an iceberg that would float to the surface. But they eventually had to let go of all these potential strategies since the Titanic is way too fragile to ever be recovered. The Titanic may be one of the most interesting ships lying at the bottom of the ocean, at least in popular culture, but deep-sea divers have a lot of other stories to share. Planes also sometimes find their way to the bottom of the ocean. Deep-sea divers in Oahu, Hawaii, came across the wreckage of an F-4U Corsair plane. It seems to have crashed into the ocean in 1946, as it didn't have sufficient fuel. If you can dive deep enough, you might even stumble upon statues and lost artifacts, like those found in the world's only underwater archaeological park off the coast of Naples, Italy. It features the ruins of the ancient Roman city of Baia. The underwater statues found here are breathtaking, to say the least. In an ironic twist of events, some of the equipment we intended to use to get us to the moon was lost at the bottom of the sea for a very long time. But how did that happen? Beginning from the late 1960s and ending in the early 70s, many Apollo rockets were launched to orbit the Earth and the Moon. When reaching altitudes of about 38 miles, the first portion of the spacecraft, including the engines, needed to separate. People thought these components got destroyed or lost forever. But were they really? In 2012, a team of specialists discovered a bunch of rocket engines 14,000 feet off the coast of Florida. They have since gone through a 2-year renovation plan and are now on display at Seattle's Museum of Flight. Can you imagine stumbling upon a whole city underwater? Back in 2001, a lost city was discovered in the Gulf of Cambay, off the coast of India. Some archaeologists believe it to be the oldest city in history. By comparison, it's almost the size of Manhattan and features massive walls and even plazas. They stumbled upon pieces of sculpture, artwork, and even what looked like ancient wooden furniture, believed to date back up to 9,500 years ago and 5,000 years older than any city previously discovered. Okay, how about an underwater river? I can't even imagine what that would look like, but some deep divers claim to have seen it south of Tulum, Mexico. Is that even possible? Well, not really, since the Cenote Angelita Cave is not a true river, but a very special type of optical illusion. It's formed by a halocline, meaning a cloud of hydrogen sulfide at the bottom of this underwater cave. Turns out you can actually swim right through this cloud, which makes you feel like you're swimming through a flowing body of water. Not all things discovered underwater are inanimate objects. Some of them are actually quite scary sea creatures. A jellyfish might not be on your list of things to look out for if you can avoid the stings. But this giant one, also known as a lion's mane jellyfish, is the largest known species of its kind. In all fairness, you'll only uncover it if you happen to dive into the waters of the Arctic, Northern Atlantic, and Northern Pacific Oceans. You surely won't miss it, since it stretches across 120 feet from the top to the bottom of its tentacles. When it comes to deep-sea diving, a lot of people are looking to discover some lost treasure. One diver was lucky enough to have hit the literal jackpot when he came upon nearly $1 million worth of treasure on the bottom of the seabed. That was back in 2015, when this lucky diver was swimming just off the coast of Florida. What did he find, you might ask? Well, about 51 gold coins, 40 feet of gold chain, and a rare single coin that was tailored for the King of Spain, Philip V. Speaking of people looking for lost treasures, divers also sometimes found pirate ships. They discovered one of these pirate shipwrecks in 2015 off the coast of Colombia. It dates back to the 18th century. The value of this forgotten ship was estimated to be between $4 billion and $17 billion, as it contained treasures, precious stones, gold, and countless other really valuable items. By comparison, a whole island in the Bahamas is up for grabs at $75 million. A computer is the last thing you'd ever expect to discover underwater, right? And this was no regular computer, but an ancient one. And yet, someone stumbled upon it between 1900 and 1901 on the spot of a shipwreck located off one Greek island. Researchers believe this weird stone contraption to be the earliest form of a computer. It was designed to serve many purposes, such as predicting astronomical positions and eclipses on the calendar. Since humanity lost most of the technology used back then, it was wonderful to rediscover it so many years later. It let us piece together many of the ancient Greeks' accomplishments. The computer is now at the National Archaeological Museum of Athens, should you ever want to check it out in person. This has to be one of the most mysterious places on Earth. It's called the Mariana Trench, and it's the deepest part of the Earth's oceans. We really don't know how deep it is, since it's so difficult to measure, but it's somewhere around 7 miles deep and 5 times longer than the Grand Canyon. They first studied this massive underwater hole back in 1875 using a weighted rope. Back in 2012, a Canadian film director named James Cameron reached the bottom of the trench in the submersible vessel Deep Sea Challenger. Some of the most bizarre creatures on the planet call this place their home, including the Dumbo octopus, the sea cucumber, and the goblin shark. The Mariana Trench took its name after the nearby Mariana Islands, which are named Las Marianas in honor of the Spanish Queen Mariana of Austria.
Shenzhen, China. At first sight, it doesn't look like a perfect place to build one of the fanciest and tallest buildings in the world. But a company from China decided to take a chance. They had visions of building Golden Finance 117, a unique, mighty skyscraper with plenty of things super rich people could enjoy. At that time, no one knew it would turn into one of the tallest ghost scrapers in the world, meaning it would be a skyscraper with no life, events, or people inside. The one that no one would even talk about anymore. The The world has impressive tall skyscrapers. The first one was built in 1885 in Chicago. And the tallest one today is in Dubai. Then there's one in Shanghai, another one in Mecca, and Shenzhen. Golden Finance 117 was supposed to be the 5th tallest skyscraper ever built. The construction was started 13 years ago, and at first, it all looked very promising. In 2015, the building reached its full height, 1,955 feet. But then, something mysterious happened. People deserted the skyscraper shortly after it was almost done, and the whole project has remained unfinished to this day. The company got the idea in 2008. During that period, plenty of cities across China were trying to build something impressive to get their place on the world stage. Golden Finance 117 was supposed to be a commercial and residential tower for very rich people. Italian and French-style interior design, a polo club, extensive gardens. The skyscraper was supposed to have a 3-story diamond-shaped atrium at the top, with a swimming pool, sky bar, and a restaurant. And don't forget about the highest observation deck in the world, a paradise for those who could afford it. Imagine living at the top of such a skyscraper. Golden Finance 117 was expected to be habitable up to its highest point. This mixed-use skyscraper was supposed to rise 128 floors above the ground. There was a plan to turn 117 of them into commercial space and hotel, and 11 more floors were expected to be for operational and mechanical services. The building's ratio of height to width was 9.5 to 1. When you have such a high and thin tower, you have to be careful with such forces as strong winds. But the skyscraper was designed to resist all this. No wonder, with a perimeter frame of mega braces, huge tapering columns, and transfer trusses. On the surface, it all looked well, an excellent design and unique construction. But before the company started pre-sales, authorities needed to inspect and sign off on the final product. This is a process all new developers need to go through if they want to get and keep their spot on the property market. The country wants only established and reliable companies to keep the quality levels high. Back in the day, the company that was building the skyscraper was a new player in the Chinese market, so they had to finance their project all by themselves. They couldn't start recouping their investment until each of their buildings was finished. In other words, it was tricky ever since the beginning. But they were focused on the result. If they managed to finish the entire project with no major issues, the reward would be amazing. So they started in August 2008. China survived the global financial crisis that also happened in 2008, but it still affected the market. That brought lots of pressure on the company, which is why they stopped building the skyscraper in January 2010. Things got better in 2011. That's when the company decided to continue their work, finish the tower, and get ready to sell it because the market was growing once again. But considering all the rules on the property market, the company was in a very vulnerable situation. Things were getting more and more complicated. In 2015, there was a new crisis, this time affecting the stock market. The series of unfortunate events kept happening on and off until everyone stopped talking about the entire project. One more issue was the location. The skyscraper was being built on what used to be industrial land, and in the area, there weren't many wealthy people who could afford to live in such a building. The company probably hoped for people to relocate there once they finished the construction, which never happened. China generally has the biggest number of tall buildings in the whole world. There are 1,400 skyscrapers in the country. The US takes second place with more than 800 high-rise buildings. Then there's Japan with over 250 skyscrapers. 2018 was the year when China built more skyscrapers than any other country in the world. 88 new buildings with a height of 656 feet or more appeared there. But because of multiple unforeseen events, Golden Finance 117 never got its chance to shine. Now it's just a ghost place everyone stopped talking about in 2018. Now, this wasn't the only case when a building remained unfinished for a long period of time. A new airport in Berlin, Germany was meant to open in June 2012. It wasn't the first project like this to miss the deadline, but it was one of the most memorable. The airport was about to open, but right before it did, inspectors found around 120,000 defects all over the place. For example, some automatic doors didn't open. There were fire safety issues. Authorities also noticed sagging roofs. About 106,000 miles of cable were wired in the wrong way, which means they couldn't turn on some lights or turn off others. Experts were trying to solve these problems for 9 years. The airport was built to handle 27 million passengers a year. In 2019, over 45 million travelers passed through the two other overburdened airports in Berlin. These airports are now set to close and merge with the new one, which has started expanding. The original budget for the whole project was more than $8.2 billion, but it's likely to increase in the next few years. The idea occurred back in 1990, and it took 6 years just to find the right spot to build the airport. The official construction didn't start for another decade. The original code for this airport also needed to be changed since it was already in use by an airport in India. But if you design an airport in the early 2000s, will it even be compatible with the travel habits and technology in 2020 and beyond? Also, there isn't enough space for all the planes that are supposed to be there. And still, since 2020, the airport has been open and growing bigger. Meanwhile, a tower in Krakow, Poland, got the nickname Skeleton. It stood proud and tall, but its unfinished carcass indeed looked like a skeleton. At 300 feet, it's one of the tallest buildings in Krakow. The project started in 1975, but stopped because of some difficulties in the country that occurred at that time. The tower remained abandoned for a long time and changed owners several times. It was often wrapped in advertising billboards. Luckily, it didn't remain unfinished. In 2016, the latest reconstruction process started. The main goal was to turn the skyscraper into a modern office building. It's completed now. The tower consists of 5 office buildings, together with the main one in the center. Architects found inspiration in styles from the 1920s and 30s. There's a terrace at the top. In the future, a museum of the history of the building might appear in the skyscraper. And here's one more ghost tower, this time in Bangkok, Thailand. From the outside, you'd say it's just another part of Bangkok's skyline. The skyscraper is around 75% completed. But once you take a closer look, you'll see there are plenty of interior structures missing. It was supposed to be a luxury building, but right now it's just another abandoned skyscraper. It's surrounded by a fence and doesn't look safe. The walls are covered with graffiti and there's no electricity. The building stands there as a reminder of what it could have become and draws the attention of urban explorers from all over the world. The construction process stopped when the crisis started, and now only occasional adventurers visit the site to enjoy the magnificent view of the city and the river.
Oh, gravity, you heartless so-and-so. Well, that's what I think when I trip over a stone and fall face down. Of course, I'm not clumsy, you know. Anyway, gravity is a constant, right? Something entirely unshakable that we can always rely on in this ever-changing world. Unlike, love. Feeling romantic, sorry. But what if I told you that it's not as honest and clear as you think? There are places on our planet where gravity behaves like it's gone crazy. And that's why you clicked here. So let's take a look. Magnetic Hill in Leh, India. There's a stretch of road in India that's been attracting tourists from all over the world. It's no different looking from the surrounding landscape, and you could easily pass it by without noticing, if not for one very unusual and a bit creepy thing. If you stop your car on the magnetic hill going up the slope and put it on neutral, it'll start crawling upwards, eventually reaching the speed of up to 12 miles per hour. They say there's some sort of magnetic force at work here that tugs cars up the hill, hence the name. On top of that, even airplanes are said to gain altitude above this place. Skeptics offer another explanation, though. It's just the lay of the land that creates an illusion of going upwards, while in fact you're moving down the hill and vice versa. Whatever the truth, I'd like to see it for myself. Would you? Tell me down in the comments. The Crooked Forest, Poland. Near the village of Nowa Charnowo, there's a forest in the depth of which you can find a strangely looking pine tree. Planted in the 1930s, there are 400 trees that sharply twist to the north almost at the roots, and then grow upwards in a semicircle. Although scientists offer different theories about the tree's weird growth, nobody can say for sure what made them look like that. Some say it's people who did it, while others believe it's a gravitational anomaly that somehow pushed the trees down. The trouble with this version, though, is that it would have had to stay there for years, and that only affected the trees. Still, no certain explanation exists anyways, so who knows? A waterfall, Faroe Islands. Ever seen an upward-moving waterfall? You can have a look at one on the Faroe Islands, halfway from Iceland to Scotland. But if you were expecting me to tell you an unbelievable story about a mysterious force pushing the water up the rock, then sorry, no such thing here. The truth, however, is quite jaw-dropping anyway. The winds in this place are so powerful that they lift the water and throw it back up. I guess it was this kind of wind that allowed Mary Poppins to travel on her umbrella. Sounds good. In fact, this waterfall is not unique. There are several more places on Earth where winds create an illusion of defied gravity. For example, there's the Kinder River in England that has a waterfall constantly struggling with the wind. It's so strong that half of the Cascades water seems to just fly up without ever touching the bottom of the drop. Hoover Dam in Nevada, USA. If you ever get up to the top of the dam, which is about 726 feet high, you can try a little trick. Take a bottle of water and pour it over the edge. You'll see the water flow up instead of spilling down. Once again, this isn't really any magic or unnatural phenomenon. The wind up here is simply too strong for the water to fall, just like with the waterfall on the Faroe Islands. Here, though, it looks even more impressive since you can do it yourself. Dokkaebi Road, South Korea. Another gravitational anomaly located on a road. Locals once found out that if you put an empty can or a bottle on the ground, it will immediately start rolling uphill. Unlike other such places in the world, though, Dokkaebi Road doesn't just create an illusion. When you walk down the slope, you don't feel as if you're going up. Everything's pretty normal. But once you put down an object that can roll, it will do that in the opposite direction than it should. Local authorities were quick to get the idea and put a signpost directing curious tourists to the mysterious road. Golden Rock, Burma. If you happen to be in Burma, these days it's also called Myanmar, make sure to visit this well-known site. A gold leaf-covered boulder sits upon the edge of a cliff, and a small pagoda is built on top of it. The impressive thing about the rock is that it only lightly touches the cliff for support. In fact, it looks like the boulder will fall any minute now, but it has been standing like that for centuries. On top of that, the pagoda built upon it is not really a recent addition, so it's quite an unusual sight to see. The rock seems to be saying, "Gravity? I don't care about that stuff." The legend has it that what keeps the boulder in place is a single strand of Buddha's hair. Well, I don't know about that, but you can check out the rock for yourself and see that it's not attached to the cliff by anything. And yet, it's not budged for 2,500 years. Something must be at work here, huh? Stone of Damasco, Argentina. If there ever was a thing that said, "I defy gravity" out loud, it's the Stone of Damasco. The huge 300-ton boulder stands precariously on the edge of a cliff and rocks a little bit from side to side in the wind. People even checked it by putting glass bottles under one of its edges. They exploded with another movement of the rock. Unfortunately, today you can't see this wonder of nature as it was a century ago. In 1912, the boulder suddenly dropped from its perch, which it had occupied for literally hundreds of years. The people in the nearby town of Tandil were so sad about this event that 95 years later, in 2007, they decided to restore the stone. Well, not exactly put it together chip by chip. They made a plastic replica of the rock and put it on the same spot and even in the same position. So even today, coming by Tandil, you can see its famous balancing boulder. More of a symbol now, of course, because it's no longer rocking and only weighs 9 tons, but instantly recognizable nonetheless. Devil's Tower in Wyoming, USA. Remember this place from the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind? If not, you should go watch it, but not right now. This place doesn't make you feel like you're witnessing some magic and doesn't really trick gravity right before your eyes. Sounds almost boring compared with the rest of the sites on my list, right? But the true mind-blowing feature of Devil's Tower is that scientists can't explain how it came to existence in the first place. You see, it's an 867-foot rock formation with walls so steep they're basically vertical. But that isn't even the main thing. This piece of stone just rose amid rolling plains of Wyoming with nothing like it for miles and miles around. So how is it that such a flat landscape could have suddenly given birth to something so tall? Theories abound, but nobody has the answer yet. My theory? Well, perhaps here is where the Earth has a giant outie belly button. Well then, you come up with a better theory. Oregon Vortex, USA. The House of Mystery in Gold Hill, Oregon amazes its visitors with gravity-defying effects. You can't stand straight there, always leaning to the side and having to hold on to something for balance. Balls roll upwards. And there's also a broom that stands perfectly still wherever you put it, unlike virtually everything else in this shack. The local Native American tribes called this place the Forbidden Ground, even before the house was built there, and they avoided approaching it. The owners of the shack, though, decided to turn it into an attraction, and they succeeded. They created an atmosphere of mystery around the place and spread the news about it in newspapers and later on the internet, and voila, a perfect anomaly is made. In fact, it's no more than a curiosity, a human-made optical illusion that tricks your eyes and other senses. Hudson Bay, Canada. Okay, we've talked about some pretty ambiguous stuff. But now it's time for the real deal, the Hudson Bay anomaly. This is probably the only place in the world where gravity is indeed lower than anywhere else on the planet. Even skeptics can't smirk at it because the difference has been measured with precision equipment. So, does it mean that the gravity here is as low as, say, on the moon then? Unfortunately, or is it luckily, I'm not sure yet, the difference is minuscule. The exact value is 0.005%, or 1/200%. You won't be able to feel it even if you try your hardest, but it's still there. Scientists say this anomaly exists because of the ice sheet that covered the area about 10,000 years ago. It compressed the rocks so much that they still can't fully recover, shifting the gravitational field in Hudson Bay. Sometime in the future, though, the gravity will return to normal in this area as well. No moonwalk for me then.
No, you can't see the Great Wall of China from space. It's a cool myth, but it's still a myth and has nothing to do with reality. NASA confirmed it, and now you know it too. Still, the wall is a magnificent place, and you're lucky today. I'm taking you there, so fasten your seatbelts. We're going to China, the biggest Asian country, the third biggest country in the world, and with over 1.3 billion people living there, is still the most populated one, even though India is getting closer and will probably take the first place soon. China is also one of the oldest nations in the world. It has 3,500 years of continuous written history, but the civilization existed long before that. Historians believe that China wasn't populated by settlers that came from somewhere else. The Chinese civilization most likely got formed from local Stone Age people who lived on the territory since the prehistoric period. So no wonder that the country is full of history and ancient landmarks, and I'll show you a couple. We are at the Great Wall. It's over 13,000 miles long, almost 5 times the distance between New York and Los Angeles, or a bit longer than the distance between North and South Poles. This is impressive, even today. Of course, it didn't take a day to build it. In fact, the wall was being built for centuries. Maybe you know that ancient cities had walls around them to protect the locals from the invaders? Yes, Chinese cities had them too. The first Chinese emperor united the country in 220 BC and got a brilliant but very ambitious idea. to turn all city walls into one big wall that would defend the country's borders. So the process started. In the beginning, the wall was made of rammed earth and wood. Every next emperor would pick up the big wall project, strengthening and extending it, repairing, but also modernizing construction techniques. Some used brick to build the wall, some moved on to granite and marble blocks. Watchtowers and platforms weren't there from the beginning as well. They were added 19 centuries after the construction started. So the wall is quite inconsistent in terms of material, but it only adds more charm to the construction and shows how much effort and time it took. You can notice that some bricks have writing carved on them. They were left by the workers who were building the wall. The purpose of those writings is quality assurance. They contain such information as location, quantity, and responsible officials. So in case of problems with the quality of materials or constructions, it would be known who was responsible for that. Also, mind that the wall is poisonous. To prevent erosion of the wall by insects, arsenic, a poisonous chemical element, was used in construction. So better not lick it in case you had this weird urge. The construction stopped at the end of the 19th century because the wall lost its strategic and military importance in the world due to technological advances. Walls are way less efficient than they used to be, coming close to zero efficiency. So the construction lasted over 2,000 years, still making it the longest construction project in the world. Unfortunately, today the Great Wall isn't in the best shape. It's estimated that only 8% of the wall is in good condition, and the rest is considerably damaged. Also, around 1/3 of the wall has disappeared without a trace due to both natural erosion and human damage. Also, many bricks were taken away from it in the last century to use in building farms and homes. The wall is being deconstructed stone by stone even today, but this time by tourists. Quite a few of them take a stone as a souvenir. That's a total of a lot of stones, considering that over 50 million tourists visit the Great Wall every year. So we're not taking a souvenir from our today's trip, just preserving the memories. Let's now pay a visit to the Forbidden City. It's an imperial palace that took 16 years to build and was completed 600 years ago. To this day, it's the largest palace in the world. It has 980 buildings and over 8,000 rooms. Why forbidden? Well, centuries ago, ordinary people like you and me couldn't just walk the streets of that town, since it was considered a divine place and was home to the emperor. No one could enter or leave the city without the emperor's permission. Today, the Chinese more often refer to it as former palace, but of course in Chinese. I just can't pronounce that. The designs there aren't random at all. The details reflect the traditional Chinese architecture, and even the colors are chosen with the help of feng shui. The roofs of the city are yellow, which represents the supreme power of the emperor. Most walls and pillars of the city are red, representing fire, earth, and strong support. The floors there are made of so-called gold brick. These are not actual gold, but surprisingly, they are just as valuable. It's very hard to make them, and especially to copy the ancient technique. 2 original tiles from the Forbidden City were sold for 800,000 yuan. It's $115,000 US. You can also see animal statues on roofs. Just like colors, animals have meaning in Chinese culture. Dragons, phoenixes, and lions are the most powerful ones. Dragons symbolize strength and good luck and are crucial for the culture. They appear everywhere, in idioms, legends, astrology, art, and so on. In ancient China, emperors were considered sons of dragons. So it seems like the Targaryens aren't the only ones after all. And ordinary people weren't even allowed to have items with dragons. As for a phoenix, in Chinese mythology, their rare appearance during the ascent to the throne of a new emperor is a good sign of harmony. In feng shui, it's also a symbol of luck, and when used correctly, it's believed to bring positive energy to the house. Lions signify strength and power. They always come in pairs, a male and a female, and they're the guards. The number of animal statues on the roof signifies the importance of the building. The city is made of wood, and without any nails used, they are considered violent, so they aren't welcome. You can imagine that a wooden city is a serious fire hazard. A little fire and the city with a 6th century history will quickly turn to ashes. So, fire prevention is taken very seriously there. The city has a whole bunch of firefighting equipment, and there's even a special fire brigade that knows the whole layout of the city better than their own apartment and watches the city every day. Walking around the city, you can notice something very unusual. No birds are sitting on the roofs here, ever. When it was built, the birds were taken into account, and the engineers constructed the roofs in a particular way to ensure that no bird can land and sit on them. The roof spines are wider than the width of birds' claws, and the slope of each roof is higher. Also, the roofs are made of slippery tiles, so the birds can't land there. What do they have against the birds? Well, this way the city stays cleaner and looks more magnificent. So, there are no birds, but there are over 100 cats in the city. They actually are an important part of this story. Some of these kitties are royal descendants. You see, 2 royal dynasties that lived in the city kept cats. The dynasties later collapsed, but the cats stayed in the city and have lived there ever since. Of course, some stray cats have joined the royalty over the years. But hey, no one minds it, and no DNA test has been made to see who's royal and who's not. After all, they all equally patrol the city, hunt mice, and possibly some stranded birds, and guard the city. So all cats are welcome.
There are many myths around arguably the greatest structure ever built by humans, the Great Wall of China. Some say it's so grand that it's visible from space. Others claim that you can see it from as far as the moon. Other theories suggest that the builders of the wall were left inside. Well, sorry to disappoint you, but all these impressive stories are just myths. But even with those stories busted, the Great Wall of China is an impressive and truly breathtaking structure. So let me tell you its true story. Today, China is one of the most populated countries in the world, counting as many as 1.4 billion residents. It's also one of the oldest nations in the world. It has 3,500 years of continuous written history, but the civilization existed long before that. There is a theory that while the European continent, for example, was most likely reached by humans from Africa, China wasn't populated by settlers that came from somewhere else. Some people believe that the Chinese civilization got formed from local Stone Age people who lived on the territory since the prehistoric period. So now, the Great Wall of China. It's truly big even by today's standard, stretching for over 13,000 miles. To imagine it better, it's almost 5 times the distance between New York and Los Angeles. Or even a bit greater than the distance between the North and South Poles. Even in modern times, people have never built anything close to this big. Of course, it didn't take a day to build the Great Wall of China. 2? Keep going. In fact, the wall was being built for centuries. Maybe you know that ancient cities had walls around them to protect themselves from invaders. Yes, Chinese cities had them too. The first Chinese emperor united the country in 220 BCE and got a brilliant but very ambitious idea to turn all city walls into one big wall that would defend the country's border against attacks from the north. A trusted general directed the construction, enrolling a big group of workers, soldiers, commoners, and convicts. Back then, the wall was built of rammed earth and wood. In some places that were strategically important, the sections of the wall overlapped to provide maximum security. The walls were around 26 feet high on average. But the Great Wall didn't yet look like the construction we know today. Every next emperor would pick up the big wall project, strengthening and extending it, repairing, but also modernizing construction techniques. Some used bricks to build it, others moved on to granite and marble blocks. Watchtowers and platforms weren't there from the beginning as well. They were added by Ming emperors. The watchtowers made it possible to communicate with other parts of the wall through smoke and fire messages. So, the wall is quite inconsistent in terms of material, but it only adds more charm to the construction and shows how much effort and time it took. The reasons why some parts of the wall have been standing for centuries and are still in good condition is glutinous rice flour. Turns out, this sticky rice mortar is almost like cement. It's very strong and waterproof, sealing the bricks so tightly together that even sneaky weeds can't grow between them. You may also notice that some bricks have writings carved on them. They were left by the workers who were building the wall. The purpose of those writings is quality assurance. They contain such information as location, quantity, and responsible officials. So, in the case of some problems with the quality of materials or constructions, it would be known who should be held accountable for it. Recently, a research group has looked through official historical documents of the Ming Dynasty that ruled China from the 14th to the 17th centuries. They came across records of secret doors in the Great Wall, so they decided to find them. They used a flying robot to capture continuous centimeter resolution photos of the wall. They photographed 90% of the wall that was built during the Ming Dynasty and discovered the remains of over 220 secret doors along the wall. Some of them have a specific width and height that allows only one person to go through. Others are large enough to allow 2 horses to pass at the same time. Why are the doors there? Well, the Great Wall's main goal was to protect the country from the enemy. Building doors that could let the enemy in would undermine the whole point of having a wall. So, of course, the doors were secret passages. They perfectly matched the surroundings topographically, and the exit on the outside was camouflaged with bricks so that it was almost completely indistinguishable from the brick wall. The wall was never just a defensive wall, and it was never completely closed. It could be opened on demand. It was also a structure used for trade and commerce, communication between inside and outside the wall, and of course, for defense and spying. Some doors were used for trade with the other side. Through smaller doors, a person would sneak out to spy on the enemy that lived on the other side. The hidden gates were also useful for a sudden attack. As you remember, some gates were camouflaged with brick on the outside. The exit was so indistinguishable that the enemy had no idea exactly where it was located. The inside entrance for Chinese soldiers was hollow, so they could walk through the wall and break the camouflaged exit gate from the inside, starting their surprise attack. Now, even though the main point was to prevent outsiders from getting into the city, the wall wasn't too effective on that matter. It could still be climbed over or marched around. So the wall was being watched at all times, and the guards gave signals to the troops if they saw the enemy approach. Also, the wall provided more time to mobilize and bulk up the country's forces or lure the enemy troops into a difficult strategic position. The construction stopped at the end of the 19th century. The wall lost its strategic and military importance due to technological advances. Over the centuries to today, only 8% of the Great Wall is in good condition, and the rest is damaged. Also, around 1/3 of the wall has disappeared without a trace, due to both natural erosion and human damage. I guess you could say it's now just a pretty good wall. As you remember, the first parts of the wall were built out of rammed earth and wood. These are not the most unfailing materials if we're talking about thousands of years. Also, destructive farming methods have turned large areas into a desert and contributed to erosion. Also, many bricks were taken away from the wall in the last century to be used in building farms and houses. The wall is being deconstructed stone by stone even today, but this time by tourists. Quite a few of them take a stone as a souvenir. That's a total of a lot of stones, considering that over 10 million tourists visit the Great Wall every year. Since 1987, the wall has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site, highlighting that it has an outstanding importance to humanity. The wall is one of China's 56 World Heritage Sites, second place among countries with landmarks protected by UNESCO. Who's first, you ask? Well, the top spot, with 58 World Heritage Sites, belongs to Italy. And do you know that the wall isn't only a famous tourist attraction, but also the location of the Great Wall Marathon? It's a marathon that was established in 1999, and is one of the most challenging ones in the world. You guessed right, people run along the wall, including all the steps. There are 3 distances, so that participants can run a full marathon that is 26 miles, a half marathon that's 13 miles, or just have a fun run of 5 miles.